In this video, I will be going through my PhD stipend and a breakdown of how I'm saving money, how the stipends are distributed, the other benefits that I have, and just generally a monthly what I spend. Hi, my name is Nia. I am a PhD student at UPenn studying computational biology. All right, so I have my iPad right here. We are going to go through the numbers. I really like watching these types of financial videos like the what I spend in a month on TikTok and other monthly YouTube videos. So I thought it would be fun to do one for myself because I honestly haven't found that many videos specifically for the PhD stipend and how that works for other schools. And I think the finances are very important when you're thinking about going back to school for 4 to 6+ years and what that looks like financially. My stipend is $41,500 a year. And the way that the stipend works is it's just divided by 12, and that's the amount that we're getting paid every month. So, in terms of benefits and other things that are added to the stipend, we're all covered under health insurance, dental, and we are also given a $2,000 moving stipend at the beginning of the year. So that was just a one-time lump sum amount. They also provided us with laptops. So if you saw my other video, I did an unboxing for my MacBook Pro. I think this is particular to UPenn. I'm not sure if this is across multiple different grad programs within UPenn or just multiple grad programs across the country, but the stipend is not taxed. And this is something to really keep in mind because that means that you have to save every month for taxes at the end of the year. I think this is only particular to the first 2 years of being a PhD student. Even though the stipend is around $3,500, we're supposed to be putting aside about $200 a month. The next part I want to go through is my current budget. So this is something that I kind of tried to somewhat stick to at the beginning of the year. It was honestly more of a ballpark range because I knew that in the first few months it would take me some time to actually adjust and figure out what I'm spending money on and what are like my key focuses that I maybe overspend in categories. So this is just kind of a range that I started with, and I definitely have gone over in some categories, as you'll see, because I'll actually go through my monthly spending for October and November. But this is kind of what I started with. So I try to stay within around $200 of this budget in each category. That way, I'm still able to save somewhat. So, this is more of an ambitious goal so that I could have savings even if I go over these categories. So, keep that in mind. The first category that I consider is rent. And rent is very important because that is probably going to be the highest chunk that is taken out of your stipend. And that is very dependent on the area that you're living in. I live in Philadelphia, which is where University of Pennsylvania is. And it's generally a pretty affordable city to live in, which is something that I definitely took into consideration when choosing UPenn. But if I was to live in Boston or California or New York, for example, probably more than 50% of my stipend would go towards my housing costs. So that is definitely something to keep in mind when choosing a program. The housing cost will, I think, make a very big difference in how much you're actually able to save for your stipends. Currently, my rent is $950. That's just kind of something I set aside in my budget. It doesn't really change, so I don't really need to worry about that category as much. It's pretty, I think, average for it's maybe on the lower side of what people are spending in Philadelphia. When I was looking for housing, I was kind of really focusing on having it under around $1,100 because that seemed to be the average in Philadelphia. This definitely changes if you're living with roommates, if you're living by yourself in a one bedroom in a studio. I'm currently living in a studio and I really wanted to live by myself throughout my PhD because that was just something that I thought would be helpful. People have roommates, people live with their spouses or their partners. So that's definitely something to consider in factoring in the housing costs. You can definitely get lower if you're living with roommates, or some people I think are like on the higher end around $1,400. The nice thing about my program is they kind of gave us a document before we started of the averages around the neighborhoods, where to live, and how much people were generally paying. And I think the general average was around maybe $800 to $1,400. So bigger range, but all dependent on different factors of where you're living, how close you are to the school, if you're having roommates, if you're not, in those situations. Utilities I have at about $150. This is including gas, electric, internet. For subscriptions, I have it at about $20 a month. I don't really have that many subscriptions, so I just kind of summed up most of the subscriptions that I have, and maybe this will fluctuate about $10 a month or so, depending on what I am feeling like canceling or keeping in a month. For transportation, I have this at about $50 to $100 a month. This is because I do not have a car, which I think makes a big difference in my monthly spending. Philadelphia is a pretty walkable city, so I don't really have to worry about, I guess, renting a car as much as I thought I would, or having a car myself. So that definitely brings my transportation and general costs down. And I live pretty close to campus, so I usually walk. The SEPTA, they just increased the prices, unfortunately, to $250 a ride. So usually if I'm going like there somewhere and back, it's about $5 a ride. With that and Ubers, I don't really estimate that my transportation costs will be more than like $100 a month. The next category is food. So for food, I try to stay under $300 a month. And in that category, I have groceries and eating out. So my groceries budget is about $200 a month, and then my eating out budget is about $100 a month. And I generally like to stay under $300 and just kind of fluctuate. So if I'm spending more on eating out, I'm assuming that my grocery bill will probably be lower because I'm not cooking as much as home. So I kind of am fine with if like the eating out budget is higher and the grocery budget is lower, as long as I'm around $300 for groceries. Miscellaneous, I kind of just set this as a random number when I started because I wasn't really sure what I would be spending on outside of those kind of key categories. So I have this at about $200, but I'm very sure that I will go over this. So this was just kind of a starting budget, and then from there I was just going to adjust after a few months. That brings my spending to about $1,700 a month, and then from there I estimate that, or not estimate, but this is ambitious. I say that my savings would be around $1,500 a month. This is including the $200 that I will set aside for taxes, so it'll really be around $1,300 a month. And then from there, breaking that down even further, I would have a travel sinking fund that I would contribute about $200 to, because I do like to travel and I know that I will be spending money on flights and hotels and things like that. So might as well put the money aside ahead of time. And then I would want to contribute around $500 a month to my Roth IRA, because that is something that I would like to prioritize, especially because ideally after I graduate, I would be making more money and I would potentially not be eligible to contribute, at least traditionally. The allocated amount that we're able to contribute for 2025 is $7,500. To be able to kind of meet that goal somewhat, around $500 a month would be ideal. And then generally I would probably have the rest of my money just going towards investments, because I did max out my personal emergency savings. So I would advise that if you haven't maxed that out already for your personal goals, you should focus on that first. But yeah, that is my budget. Let's see how much I actually met that budget in October and November. For October, I was given a stipend again of the $3,458. No deductions or anything was taken out. From that, my housing, my rent was $950. My utilities were $59. So this was a bit lower because I think there was like an issue with paying for my internet. So my internet was actually higher the next month. And then transportation was $40 this month, so a little bit lower. Food was $343, $310 being for groceries and $33 for eating out. So a little bit lower on eating out, but higher on groceries. And then subscriptions this month was $30. And then for my extra expenses, I definitely overspent in this category. So I spent $710. And a big chunk of this actually was because I was still purchasing things for my new apartment. So I ended up spending around $500 to get like a TV, some other furniture from IKEA. So this was a little bit inflated for the month of October, but this put my total spending at $2,183. And then I ended up saving $1,275. Looking back at, I guess, the original budget, I definitely overspent in some categories, which was expected. And then if I'm setting aside the $200 for taxes, $200 of that would go towards taxes, and then $1,075 would go towards my other savings categories. So looking at November, I kind of wanted to show two different months because let's say some categories were maybe inflated or I'm still in the adjustment period, I would say, of figuring out my specific financial situation and what I'm spending money on. So I thought it would be nice to show 2 months rather than one. For November, my income again was $3,458. From that, housing, I spent $950 again on rent. My utilities, I spent $137. So this is definitely because it was starting to get cold. I was using heat more. And then for Wi-Fi, I spent $130. So that was a culmination of some payments from October and November. For transportation, I spent $102 this month. I think this was definitely because I was traveling a bit more in November because of Thanksgiving and other things that I needed to Uber more for. And my food was $385, a little bit higher in this category for this month. And then my miscellaneous was $630, I think also a little bit high because of upcoming travel that I had. And then that brought my total savings to $1,085. And then I'm putting $200 away again for taxes, and that leaves me with $885 for the rest of my savings categories. So I also wanted to go through how I actually track my budget because I think this is very important for actually understanding where you're spending your money. This isn't like, I guess, PhD specific advice, but this is just how I get my numbers, how I stay on track with everything. I personally use Monarch and Google Sheets. This is not a sponsored video by Monarch, but I wish it was. Monarch is an online or like an app that allows you to add multiple different accounts. So you can add your credit cards, your debit cards, your savings accounts, your investments. You can add your retirement, and even if you have like mortgages, things like that, you can add that all into the app. You can see your total net worth, so combined from all of that. And then it will also track your spending habits. You can create a budget on the app and easily see how much you're overspending month by month. You can also see how your net worth is growing or decreasing. And it also tracks investments pretty well because it is in tune with all of those apps. So I personally like Monarch. I actually originally used Mint. If any of you are familiar, it was a free version of basically what Monarch does in combining all of your accounts. And then Mint ended up getting bought by Credit Karma, and I really didn't want my information getting moved to Credit Karma, so I ended up paying for this service. So it's not free. When I moved, they had a promotion, so it was $50 for a year, which I didn't think was bad. But I think now they've actually increased the cost to $100. So I'm not exactly sure if I will renew in the next year because 100 is a little steep. I think they also do have promotions for $70 for a year, but I personally like Monarch a lot right now. It makes my budgeting very easy, it makes my tracking very easy, and anytime that I have like subscriptions or things I forgot to cancel, it's pretty easy for me to see where my money is going and how to do all of that. So I personally like that. I also use Google Sheets just to make tracking across months easier so that I can just like pull data from Monarch and put it in Google Sheets. Google Sheets is free. I'm sure that many creators that are more in tune with financial content also have free templates and things like that. So if you don't want to pay, there are free apps as well. I use Monarch and I use Google Sheets for trackings. It's very important to choose a way that you will actually track your information. So don't set up a whole system where you're including your information and everything, but then you're not ending up actually checking the budgeting. So just choose whatever works for you and what will actually keep you accountable. So that's the one bit of advice I would have for tracking. The last bit of information that I kind of wanted to go through was just some general advice and reflections I have from the past few months of living on the PhD stipend. My financial situation has definitely changed a lot this year. At the beginning of this year, I was working a full-time job. My salary was more than double what I'm making right now, so I've drastically had to adjust certain parts of my lifestyle, how I'm living, how I'm saving, and those are just things that I've kept in mind as starting the PhD. I really wanted to be able to still keep my savings high and still make a good effort towards my savings and investment goals. It is perfectly okay to not be able to save month by month or even to be able to save that much at all during the program. The stipend isn't really meant for you to save that much. And hopefully after the PhD, you would be making enough money where you would be able to kind of help your financial situation better. If you are able to save, it's a nice little boost while you're still doing school, and the expectation is you're not really supposed to be, I guess, focusing on your financial goals because you're focusing on your career goals of just being a student and learning. People have very different financial situations coming into the PhD, so that's something to keep in mind and thinking about how you're potentially living on a lower monthly stipend or just a yearly income while you're still in school and not necessarily able to make as much money as you might be if you're out of school. So there are definitely, I think, ways that you can increase your stipend if needed. So TAing is an option, which we have the option to do after our second year. And I know some programs, depending on which school you go to and what program you are, require you to do TAing. My program allows us to get paid around, I think, $3,000 to $4,000 per TAing class, and then we're capped at two TAing sessions, I guess, per time at our PhD. Some people do tutoring, some people, I guess, do some type of consulting on the side or something. Internships are an option. For us, we're only allowed to do one internship during our whole time. So there are definitely ways to kind of tailor the financial situation for the PhD specifically for your case. While you're doing a PhD, you're not guaranteed stipend increases. So that's very dependent on your school. If your school is having students in a union, those are things to keep in mind as well. For my example, last year they increased the stipend $1,500. They try to, I guess, increase it based on inflation from time to time, but that's not always the case. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below and then continue to have this discussion on finances with PhD. Thank you for watching, and hopefully this was helpful information.